So, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Matt Boyage, I'm the Senior Solutions Architect with Liquidware. And today we're going to take a look at every single thing that Jason mentioned from an application layering as well as a profile management standpoint in your favorite WVD environments. And we're also going to talk about some future state stuff, including the FlexApp 1 demo, which I am supremely excited about. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to log into my WVD session. So my WVD session is non-persistent, meaning that this is the first time the system has ever seen me. And what I'm going to do with this session is we're going to do quite a bit. We're going to segment in about 110 unique applications. And I'm also going to segment in my entire profile, and my profile weighs in at around 22 gigabytes worth of data. So it's a decent sized profile. Now you're going to recognize this is most definitely WVD. In fact, if I could just go right here and type in WinVer, we're seeing that this is definitely Windows for virtual desktops, and we can see that as evidenced by Microsoft Teams pop-up that just happened. And we're also going to go take a look really quickly at what my profile did to this system. You're seeing a lot of things flash across the screen. We're going to explain what all of those things are as we go through this system. So first and foremost, let's talk about my profile just to see exactly what I've segmented into this system. I am a bit of a hoarder of data, so you're going to find gigabytes and gigabytes of information that I have had for a very long time. You might say, well, Matt, how exactly did all this happen? Some of these date modifieds are pretty old. Where did this data come from? Well, within the profile Unity construct, we have the ability to migrate data in from your existing systems. So if I have gigabytes of data in my documents and I want that migrated to a UNC path that lives inside of Azure so I can redirect a folder to it, that's an option. If you have an existing profile that you have huge amounts of information that lives inside of it and you want to migrate that to WVD, we can do that as well. Now, to lend some credence to that, we're actually going to go poke around inside of my registry for a moment. And as we do that, we're going to find a lot of stuff. And this is because this profile has been with me for almost 10 years. And it's seen 8 different versions of Windows, not just WVD, but it's seen Windows 7 and Windows 10 and Server 2016 and Server 2019. And again, we here at Liquidware believe that the profile should be modular. It should be something that I can just take out and put someplace else whenever I want. And that's exactly what I've done here is I've taken the profile that I've been working with for the last 10 years and said, I want to migrate this into WVD, and we can do this for you automatically using your users' existing machines and using your users' existing profiles. So how did we make this work? Especially if this can live alongside an FS Logics container. What's the magic trick here? How exactly are we making a profile work with multiple versions of Windows simultaneously? Well, the first thing we're going to do is we're going to take a look at my profile itself. So we have lots of ways of storing profiles. The 2 biggest ways that we use are either A, in a UNC path, which is what I'm doing here, or B, inside of a cloud storage platform. So I can have these profiles go directly to Azure Blob from my laptop, from my desktop, from my VDI session, from a competing cloud provider, and then I can just go log into WVD and say, okay, there's all my stuff. But for the sake of transparency, I'm going to show you what this looks like in a quote open format. So we're going to go to my profiles and we're going to go to my directory and we're going to see really not a whole lot here. There's only a handful of things that constitute my profile. The first 2 things, which we've already kind of looked at, are my redirected folders. And this is where my gigabytes and gigabytes of data really kind of live. And we also have my desktop, which has got some shortcuts in there and some reg keys and some other scripts that I've been working on. But the real star of the show is down here. So I have these 2 entities working for me called portability and profile disk. So what do they do? Well, first, portability is how we create a modular version of the Windows profile that doesn't care about your version of Windows. So the first thing we do is we export the registry as a series of .reg files. and we check those files for corruption to make sure there's nothing broken within them. And then what we do is we wrap those files up within a compression engine. And the compression engine allows us to A, make the data points really small. I'm getting a 50-to-1 compression ratio rate in some cases. And B, it allows me to leverage something called an MD5 hash. So that means I can have a hash or another layer of protection around this area. So that way, even in the event that something goes really sideways, I can make sure that your data is still safe with multiple forms of safety rails and multiple forms of protection. Now, what happens is when I leverage this alongside of an FSLogix container, the FSLogix container is just a disk. It lives someplace on your network, or we're synchronizing it back and forth to the cloud. Consider this the extra layer of safety to that disk. So if something in that disk becomes corrupted, this will fix it. If that disk becomes destroyed, I can create a new disk, and this data will automatically propagate all of my profile data into that disk, with one exception. We're not moving caches. So things like OSTs, PSTs, your Chrome, IE, Firefox, Java settings, all those settings are always going to be there. But the caches behind them, well, we don't need to collect that because the disk can just regenerate the caches. So that's exactly what's going on here. This is the core of my profile. All of this stuff in the root is that segmented section of the profile that can apply to any version of Windows. And then all these little areas right here, for example, this is the stuff in Windows that can't be easily migrated. It needs to be segmented. And this is how we're able to say, I don't care about your version of Windows. It doesn't matter what you log into. I can make your profile experience identical across anything that you move to, and I can migrate your existing profile data into the system. So that's the first thing that we did when I logged into my WVD system, but it's not the only thing we did. So in fact, if we go to someplace like apps and features, for example, you're going to see that this is a fully segmented version of Windows WVD with all the standard WVD functions in it. But there's a huge amount of applications that have been bundled on top of this. So you're going to see a huge amount of stuff leveraged on this system. So there's my redistributables, and you'll see Microsoft Office as part of things, but we'll also see OpenOffice. We're seeing Opera, we're seeing Chrome, we're seeing Firefox. We're seeing a lot of different applications segmented onto the system. Where did all these come from? Well, these all came from FlexApp. This system was just a clean, simple base WVD image when I started. And now that I've put my profile and my applications on there, within 15 seconds, within that login time frame, I now have everything to make this machine mine available to me. So let's talk about exactly how we do that. So first, let's take a look at some of these applications, and let's talk about what's going on with them. Now, I haven't chosen an easy application list. In fact, all of the applications I have here are a problem for one reason or another. They might use something like right-click context menus and things like that. You can see I have a huge amount of right-click contexts. They might do something like use a device driver. They might use a system service. They might use a COM plus or a DCOM object. They might have a conflict with another application on the system. So what I want you to pay attention to is, first of all, that the fact that these applications are going to run at full speed. And we're also going to open up my system performance so you can see what's going on with this system. So this is a quad core WVD system. It's been cut down to only about 4 gigabytes of memory, so it really doesn't have very many resources. So this is a fairly low end WVD box. We're going to go and load this up and see how everything works. So first we'll fire off some 7-zip, which is fine. It has some right-click context menus. Then we're going to go fire up some Java, which Java is always a problem for everyone. So just to make sure that it actually works, here you go. There's some Java. And we're going to fire up some Evernote, and we're going to fire up some FileZilla, 2 applications with some absolutely horrible updaters. In fact, there's one kicking off right now, and we'll go fire off some Evernote as well, and it's going to ask me to accept some things. And again, it's got a terrible updater, so we're going to go and take a look at that. And we're also going to fire off a whole bunch of other things. We're going to do some GOM player for some high output DirectX 12 audio visual stuff, and we're going to leave that alone and minimize it back to the system. We're going to let Google Chrome run and eat up every single ounce of memory that I have, because that's what Google Chrome does. And while we're doing that, I'm also going to bring this to the Liquidware site because we have some really cool graphics that are going to run on HTML5, and we're going to let all that stuff run. Now, we've already got Greenshot open, so now I'm replacing some standard Windows functionality. So if you notice, if I hit my print screen key, suddenly the Windows print screen function's gone, and I'm using Greenshot instead. So what happens is, even if your application is replacing part of what the OS itself doesn't matter to us. It's still going to run exactly the way it's supposed to. And I've also got good old image burn here. Image burn uses a device driver to talk to a virtual DVD burner. So we're going to go let it do that. And it looks like it found that virtual burner that doesn't really exist, which is pretty cool. And now we're going to go back over here. We're going to fire off a whole bunch more applications. We're going to do some WinSCP. We're going to do some WinRAR. We're going to do some, get out of my way, registry. We're going to do some WinDirStat. We're going to do some VLC, skinned and unskinned. We're going to do some Skype, an old version of it, which is going to complain about not being compatible with WVD, which is what I want it to do. We're going to do some PuTTY. We're going to do some PuTTY Gen. We're going to do some Notepad++. And let's see, we can also do some PZip. We can do some Firefox. We can do some Thunderbird. We're going to do some Opera browsers. And we just loaded up the system pretty good, didn't we? And what did we notice? Is that despite the fact that I just fired off a good 25 separate applications, performance is still outstanding, isn't it? These are running exactly the same way I would expect a local application to run inside of a WVD environment. And on top of that, it doesn't look like I'm using a whole lot of CPU or memory or disk or network traffic or anything like that. And that is due to the fact that FlexApp is monumentally efficient. So in other words, when I start looking at all the different processes inside of my Windows system, we don't really see anything that's not box stock, do we? All this stuff just looks normal. And everything is. In fact, the one thing that we're injecting into the system that isn't stock is our filter driver, as Jason was talking about before inside of his demo. So this filter driver is doing a few different things for us. Number one, it's making all these applications work. So what I'm doing is mounting some VHDXs and I'm linking those to my system as read-only. And then this little filter driver here, there's VertFS service is saying, I want to link in my files and directories and device drivers and services, and you're going to link those in through the filter driver. But it's not the only thing it's doing. It's also managing registry conflicts and file conflicts. Now, what does that mean? That means that if I have two applications that are fighting over the same registry space, I'm going to give them their own space to play in. That way, I can have these two boxes on the same WVD system. It also is providing something called session isolation, which means that if I have 10 different people on this WVD system besides me, and some of them have some apps, but some of them don't have the same apps that I have, it's going to prevent those users from seeing those other apps, keeping you in license compliance without having to worry about how do I silo these machines. And the last thing it's doing, which I'm going to demo for you in a second, is it's also doing DLL isolation. So if I have a single application that's fighting with another application over DLLs, I can make them run side by side. So for example, LibreOffice uses one set of the C++ DLL libraries, and then OpenOffice uses a completely different version of that, and normally those things are going to conflict. But as you can see in this case, not only do they not conflict, they're running fine. They're going to run side by side right next to each other on the same machine. And the only thing you might notice is as I quickly switch between them, you might notice a tiny bit of CPU is being used. That is our file system swapping in the DLL as I need it to function for me. And that is what happens when you combine Profile Unity plus WVD plus FlexApp all in your environment. I can take a bone stock WVD image with no changes on it, completely managed by Microsoft, and I can instantly put huge amounts of profile data, huge amounts of applications on the system, and I can coordinate them off to say, these apps are for me, but not for you, and now I get the most amount of mileage out of my WVD systems. But how did I get here? How did I actually capture all these applications and make them work and upload them? That process has got to be really complicated, right? Well, no, it doesn't have to be complicated. In fact, what we're going to do now is we're going to jump into my Flex App packaging console. Now, this is a bone stock version of Windows. In this case, this is Windows 10, an older version of Windows 10. And what we're going to do is we're going to see what happens when I go and capture a bunch of applications inside of an environment, what that looks like. And then I'm also going to walk you through what happens when we capture an application ourselves. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to fire up my Flex App packaging console. And this is the structure that allows me to go and capture applications. And we're just going to take a brief look at some of the applications that I've captured before. And as you can see, I've got a lot of different captures in here. Some of them have many applications per capture. Some of them have a single application per capture. And to Jason's point earlier, this is up to you. However you want to deploy your applications, that should be up to you. So if you want to have department level applications where I have 20 applications per package, manage it that way, that's fine. If you want to have one application per package where you create it almost like a library, you can do that too. There's no downside to doing this. There's no limit to the amount of VHDXs that you can have. So you can see that I have huge amounts of packages. Some of these are available on cloud because we do support cloud streaming of applications. And some of these are available on UNC. So you have choices when it comes to how do I want to deploy my applications. So in this case, what we're going to do is we're going to go get an application installer. And as you can see in my Flex App directory, I've got more than a few. And I'm going to go and choose an older version of an application deliberately. So I'm going to get an old version of FileZilla, and we're going to go and capture that. So the first thing I'm going to do is give this a name. We'll call this FileZilla 527 for today's date. My installer location is right here on my desktop. So I'm going to choose my desktop. I can put command line switches in here. If I have an MSI, if I have a batch installer, if I want to copy some files, we can do all of those things too. The trick is if you're doing a batch installer or if you want to capture your commands of what you're copying, just don't put an installer location and we'll capture those things by default. And I'm also going to give this VHDX a location, and this location is right here on my network. And I'm going to give this a size. We want to be fairly efficient. So however big my application is going to get, I'm going to want to triple it. So in this case, I can't imagine FileZilla getting bigger than a gigabyte. So we're just going to make this 3 gigabytes to keep my VHDX nice and clean. Compression is useful if you have slow network or slow storage. If you're using something like NetApp inside of WVD for your storage, that's not slow. That's pretty quick. So we're not going to use compression there. And our disk type is going to be expandable. This means that we're going to thin provision the disk. So the disk is going to be really small and we're going to grow it, again, to stay as efficient as possible. I don't want to pay for more storage than I'm going to use. So now I'm going to click Create. And what's going to happen is I'm going to get a brand new directory, and inside of that is a brand new VHDX file. And you can see that the overhead of that file is 160 megabytes. Now, the way that we capture things is really unique. In fact, we're the only tool in the industry that has something called thread-based capture. So what that means is that when I'm capturing an application, the way most things do it, so whether we're talking about AppV, SVS, ThinApp, UnitEsk, or app volumes, they all do things the same way, which is they say, I'm going to create a snapshot of your system. I'm going to capture a moment in time of what that system is doing. And then I'm going to have you run your installer. And at the end of that, I'm going to, again, create another snapshot of your system. Whatever lies between those two snapshots, that must be your application, right? Wrong. Well, the problem is that you're also capturing all the noise and junk of Windows. So all of these things that are happening are now part of your capture. We do not do that. Instead, we're watching two threads, the thread of your application installer, and then the user portion of Windows Explorer EXE. And the reason we do that is if you create a DLL registration or a shortcut, or if you copy a file, that should be part of your package during a capture. But if I have, for example, an application update, which you can see that this application did, I also want that captured, but I don't want the noise and junk of Windows that's going on behind the scenes to be captured. Now, as I was running through this update, one thing I should mention is FileZilla did something terrible. It did something called a rip and replace, meaning that it uninstalled everything I just did and reinstalled a new version based off of what it downloaded off the web. And in fact, we can see this is a brand new version of FileZilla. My original installer was from 2018. I installed it, I updated it. Now it's current as of 2021 from a few months ago. So normally that would make any other solution go pretty crazy, but we can see that FlexApp does not care. And not only does it not care, because we're using thread-based captures, my capture was remarkably efficient. So my VHDX file started at 167 megabytes. When I'm done with my install, my uninstall, my reinstall of a new version, a rip and replace, my entire payload is only 233 megabytes. 66 megabytes for the entire capture. So that means that now that I have this capture, I can go and deploy it, I can manage it, I can edit it if I want to, so I can show you what's going on inside of a package behind the scenes. I can clone it, I can add scripts to it, I can modify how dependencies work. All of these things are by default included with every single FlexApp that you have. So in this case, what I'm doing is I'm finalizing the installation, and FlexApp is making the application nice and efficient, and I've got my brand new FlexApp package here. And if I launch the editor, just to show you exactly how efficient all this stuff is, I'm only going to see what the application needed to survive. So if I go into my file system, here's my C drive, here's FileZilla, here's all my docs and resources. Uh-oh, what's all this program data stuff? Microsoft Windows, whoop, it's just my start menu. So no noise, no junk was captured. And the best part about this is because we're thread-based, this means these applications are forward compatible with newer versions of Windows. So if I capture something, for example, in, God forbid, Windows 7, that package is not only compatible with WVD, but it's also compatible with Windows 8, Windows 8.1, Windows 10, any version, Server 2016 and Server 2019, and then again, WVD. So I can support huge amounts of applications, huge amounts of operating systems, but I only have to capture it once. And that's, again, where our power comes from. Now, the next question you might be asking is, how do I manage all this stuff? So what we're going to do is we're going to jump back into my original WVD session. And we can see here that everything's still running the way I expect it to be. And we're going to go to our Google Chrome instance that was at my webpage. And what we're going to do is we're going to go into my console. Oop, let's just finish typing that out. There we go. So here is my profile Unity console. This is the solution that I'm going to use to go and manage everything at scale. And it doesn't matter if you have 1,000 employees or 50,000 employees, this is designed to scale with you. So there's automated clustering built in, which is pretty cool. So if I want to have automated clustering of my profile Unity console to make sure that it's always highly available, I can go and do that. It has automated filter management built in. So if I'm looking for easy ways to go and deploy things to users in a very granular fashion, you have huge amounts of conditions that you can use. We automatically plug into AD, so you never have to worry about fat fingers or things breaking. And of course, we have an and or multi-combinational logic set. So I can be very granular with under what conditions do things apply to you. We also have built-in templates. So if you're worried about how do I support all these different versions of Windows the same way that Matt just showed me, the answer is you don't have to. We're going to do all that for you. So even if you're doing WVD plus Windows 10 plus Server 2019 in Azure and desktops and laptops and VDI systems, we don't care. We can still have a single profile for all of your users, and we'll manage those rules for you. Also, every one of these modules is available to you when you purchase Profile Unity and FlexApp. So we won't charge you for extra things. You instantly have access to all of these modules. But why would you use them? Why should you do this instead of doing a GPO or instead of doing scripting? Well, as you saw from my WVD login, we're extremely fast. And the reason we're so fast is because we're a multi-parallel execution platform. So while GPO fires things off in a serial fashion, one by one by one by one, and scripting does the same thing, where everything is interpreted and then executed by a command interpreter on the fly, those things are very slow. We're not. We execute modules in parallel. So if I have, for example, 43 registry rules, and I do have 43 registry rules, these are injected in parallel. Same thing with drive mappings and same thing with flex apps, which is again, one of the reasons why we're so fast. Managing things is very easy. Everything is point and click. There's searching, there's filters. This is designed to be an enterprise grade scalable solution to manage profiles, to manage environments, and then of course to manage your applications on top of WVD. Now, there is one last thing that I do want to talk about today, and Jason started talking about it towards the end of his presentation, and it was called FlexApp 1. Now, the idea is I've already shown you two ways to deploy Flex apps. You can deploy them through a UNC path in your company, or you can deploy them through cloud-based technologies, Azure Blob, Google Buckets, or S3. But what if I don't want to do that? What if I want to use Intune or SCCM or OneDrive or any other document-based repository service, and I want to do this on a physical device like a laptop? So let's say that I'm using my laptop at home and then I also have a WVD system. How do I make sure that these same applications that I'm running today here in WVD can also apply to your laptops that might not have the same bandwidth? So what we're going to do now is we're going to jump into a brand new copy of Windows that I have, my Windows 10 20H2 environment. So this is a brand new version of Windows. Again, there's not really anything installed on it. It's just a clean copy of Windows and nothing else. So you can see here it's really, really plain. There is nothing in my start menu. There is Microsoft Edge, and that's pretty much about it. So in fact, if I go to my apps and features, we're going to see there's nothing here. This is a brand new machine. There is nothing customized about it, aside from whatever my company has done for the base image. And then of course, I've got Windows Defender and things like that. What I'm going to do is I'm going to show you how to take this system and propagate it with Flex apps instantly. But I'm not going to use a deployment mechanism. Instead, what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you how things work behind the scenes. So if I have Intune or SCCM or anything, all it's doing is just taking an executable and copying it down to the system. So I'm going to do that manually right here. And I'm going to copy some executables right here. And I've copied two executables. Well, how much can you really do with two executables? Well, we're going to go and find out. So I'm going to double click on this first executable. And this is, again, what happens behind the scenes. Users running Intune will not see this window. But again, Intune has administrative rights. So I'm going to click yes. And I'm going to see something just happened right there. And the capture is now activated. And something happened right here too. What just happened? Well, what just happened is I just propagated a huge amount of applications to the system. So I just did to lend some credence. I did some 7-zip. I did some codec tools. I did some Evernote. I did some FileZilla. This all happened in about 800 milliseconds. So I've got my GOM player. I've got Google Earth Pro, which Google Earth Pro is going to complain about my graphics card because I am doing this particular instance in Hyper-V. So we're going to go and let it restart. So let's go and restart Google Earth Pro. There it goes. And just to have some fun with this, I'm going to put Google Earth Pro in flight simulator mode. So we're going to go over here. We're going to enter a flight simulator, and I'm going to choose an F-16, and we're going to launch from New York. There we go. So we're going to start a flight, and it's going to go and render all that stuff for me. And there you go, an F-16 flight simulator in real time inside of Google Earth. We've also got Greenshot. Remember, I can do the things that we did before in our demo. I'm going to do some image burn, and we're going to do some Mad VR and Media Player Classic, and we're going to do some Notepad and pzip and Pigeon and Terracopy. And I'm just launching huge amounts of applications, and I'm doing it very quickly. So we're also going to do some VLC, we'll do some WinApp, we'll do some WinRStat, WinRAR, we'll do some WinSCP. And none of these applications were here even 30 seconds ago, and they're all running pretty quickly. But I'm not done yet. So in fact, I'm also going to run another FlexApp capture. I'm going to run FlexApp capture number 2. And you can see that I added another 50 applications to this system. within a handful of seconds. So now I have all my sysinternals tools, which I'm sure everyone here loves using. I use them constantly. So I'm just going to step through those, and now I have those available to me. And I'm also going to jump down and we're going to go back and we're going to see what else we got. We got some BG Info 64. So I'm going to go and tattoo my desktop background, and we're going to go and apply that. And there you go. There's BG Info running for me. I've got Google Chrome. I've got Firefox. I've got all my favorite applications available to me on a system that was absolutely blank as of a
Nice.
handful of seconds ago. So we're also going to run some Process Explorer, because why not? And we're going to see what's going on behind the scenes in the system. In fact, I'm starting to run out of space here inside of my taskbar because I've got so many applications running, and we're going to do some putty and putty gen. And why not? Let's also do a RAM map while we're here. And the reason I'm finishing off with Process Explorer is take a look at what this system's doing. The overhead is almost nothing. There's almost nothing here aside from just my applications running the way that they're supposed to be. So remember, the way that we deployed this is any way that you want. You have SCCM, you want to keep using it, keep using it. You have Intune, you really want to leverage that solution to manage laptops remotely in the field, you should do that. If you have OneDrive, and if you want to leverage that subscription to remotely push applications through the OneDrive client, you should do that. The whole point of this is the best toys, the best solutions shouldn't just be relegated for the things that are new. It shouldn't just be about WVD. It should be about managing everything in the absolute best and most efficient way possible. Now, my closing execution is going to be this. Just as easily as we add apps, I can remove them. So in fact, all these apps are modular. So when I go to, for example, my C drive, what you're going to see is everything looks normal to Windows, but whoop, let's try that again. I accidentally hit the wrong key. Everything looks normal to Windows, but what winds up happening is we're segmenting in a whole bunch of files and directories. So the end result is all of these things are modular. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to remove them. So watch this. I'm going to stop my Flex app capture. I'm going to stop my other Flex app capture. And boop, there we go. No more applications. They're all gone. In fact, if I click on my Google Chrome icon, it's gone too. Nothing is here anymore. We have created a modular solution for applications that can be instantly deployed using any solution that you want.